Welcome to another episode of Lead Me, where we help you take the next steps in leadership. Today, Pastor Eric and Zach are discussing our roles as leaders to lead back to civility. They break down Shola Richards' practical ways to lead yourself and others in this endeavor, including eliminating what weakens us, the distinction between kind and nice, and being leaders that leave a wake of civility in our path.
So, Shola Richards is one of the speakers at last year's Global Leadership Summit that, of course, I had the privilege of watching here at one of the local sites. And he was a really good speaker. It was definitely one of probably like one of my top 5 speakers. But so Shola Richards is he's the CEO of Go Together Global. And so it's basically like a startup company that he created. And one of his biggest things is to really talk about like how to bring civility into the workplace, right? He talks about it in saying that civility is really, really important in ensuring that, we get people to talk together and to work together. And of course, as leaders, how can we really foster that in the workplace? Yeah. So that's what Shola really talked about during the Global Leadership Summit. I'm really happy that we have the opportunity to talk about that today.
Yeah, and I see that that where there's, like he mentions, or your first point here is the need for civility. Mm-hmm. So treating people with respect, I think is again one of the things. And I kind of, as I was looking through the notes here, thinking about how maybe I don't really pay as much attention to that as I should. Not that I'm mean. At least I don't think I'm mean. Maybe we could ask Adam. But, maybe I'm not always happy or super excited to, be that encourager to people that I could be better at that, Mm-hmm. And I think that's very important, because as one of his points here I thought was really interesting was the fact he talked about, how do people see you? Is this the right point where how people view you coming into the room as versus how if you're leaving the room?
Yeah, absolutely.
So maybe we could talk a little bit more about that idea.
Yeah, absolutely. So, that was one of the points that kind of really stuck out to me as well during the Global Leadership Summit. But yeah, he said there's typically like two types of people, and the first one is the person that walks into the room and everyone just like wants to gravitate towards them. You could tell like they're like this beacon of light. And then there's that other person to where everyone like breathes a sigh of relief when they leave the room. And so he talked about the differentiation between those two types of people. And how like the big difference between the two is the person that everyone gravitates towards has this ability to be civil. And I mean, it's not even, they'll kind of bring into, they'll kind of say, well, you can't always be civil, right? Like, what about those hard decisions? As a leader, you have those hard decisions you have to make, whether you're over a team of people, right? And you have to like fire them or you have to have that conversation. But he said, as a leader, that's part of the job, that's part of the requirements, but you could still be civil about having that conversation.
It's all goes back to this thought of, ideas is separate from the person.
Yeah.
So ideas can be judged a little differently, but value that person,
right, and
care for that person. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean that you don't have to deal with those difficult issues, but can you do it in a way that respects the person, that shows that you care about the person, right?
Exactly.
So,
and I feel like I don't know. I feel like that's getting harder and harder. I feel like, especially in our culture, I feel that we see a lot of incivility or, where we don't, as the Bible says, treat each other, as, you would treat yourself. Or I kind of butchered that a little bit, but
no, you're right.
It's like, how would you want to be treated and treat others in the same manner?
Well, if you loved somebody else or you care for them, then love them as yourself. That how you would want to be loved and cared about. Then that puts a whole nother spin. But like you're saying, I mean, how many times do we drive around town and we hear horns blowing, or somebody's mad because they waited too long at the light?
Yeah.
But just have compassion on people. Have a heart for people.
Yeah.
I think some of the problems with maybe we in the world and even in ministry, we've gotten so to where we can be too task oriented, to like we have to make these deadlines, we have to get these completions, and I understand that you can't escape some of that, but to not lose the value of people in that process,
Right.
I've heard John Maxwell say, actually, thank you, that he had an employee that just kind of went past all the people and went straight to his office, and he went into his office and said, hey, how's things going? He's like, I got a lot of stuff to do. I've got a lot of work to get done. And he said, well, you just passed all your work as you came in here. And in other words, just all the people you just passed by, that you just didn't take the time to really show that you care, that you value them, that you respect them. I think that's kind of that civility too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we can't lose sight of why we're here. I mean, the task is important, but a lot of times, especially like if you're in a career, and I hear this a lot too, but it's like, all right, it's the job, but when you retire, you look back and you think about the relationships, and you can't have a good relationship without civility. And it was like one of the points that he included here, but it says, do people follow you because they have to or because they want to? So it's like if you're a leader, especially if you're a leader, if that title is taken away from you, whether it's it's manager, supervisor, whatever the case may be, will people still choose to follow you? And I think that's really I don't know, that hit home for me, because it's like, well, that makes complete sense, and I think it brings into effect or brings into account responsibility, right? Because you really do start becoming responsible for your actions.
Well, and I think that a lot of times we don't realize how big of an influence we could really have on people. That we could really inspire people to move forward in areas. And a lot of times, I think that we don't think about how the ideas or the vision we have is really not. I guess it goes to the idea too. Like a lot of our programming, a lot of the things we do. That's not the power is not in the programming. The programming is just a way for you to experience something, just like Upward or, whatever service ministry we have in the church or you have in your organization. You have these different things that you use to get your people to go a direction, but it's really building the team and helping the team grow. And it's the journey that makes things matter or makes the biggest difference, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I like that part that you said. Sometimes we feel like we can't, I don't know, like we're so small and insignificant that we can't make a difference. And this week, while I was just reviewing some of Shola's topics and conversations, there was one speaking engagement, and he had like this really good example for that specifically. And he said he remembered when he was a teenager and he came back from one day, came home from school, and like they were bullying him, and he just felt so insignificant. And he told his dad, he's like, gosh, I feel so small, I feel like I can't make a difference. And his dad came back, and what he shared was so powerful, because he said, he was talking to Shola. He said, hey, Shola, when you have those moments when you feel so small and insignificant that you can't make a change, you feel like you can't make a change, he said, try going to sleep with a mosquito in the room.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's such a powerful image, because, you think of this small mosquito and while we remove like the negative connotations with mosquitoes, but they're this tiny bug, right?
Yeah.
And you can't sleep because you hear it buzzing,
Exactly.
And so even if we may be small, right, we could still have a voice that we could speak, and we could, lead. Everything's all in perspective,
Well, that reminds me of the where he talks about being in the buffalo, right?
Yeah.
And then his dad told him that story.
Yeah,
You want to share that
absolutely.
story? 'Cause
Yeah.
that's a neat story that he shared as well.
Yeah. So, in last year's Global Leadership Summit, that was one of the, I guess, metaphors or imagery or stories that his dad shared with him. And it was this idea of when a storm comes about, cows typically run away from the storm. They try to find shelter, while buffaloes, they turn towards the storm. And, they know that if they head towards it, while it's still going to be rough, right? They have to go through the eye of the storm, or like the strong part of the storm. It's still shorter than if you try to run away from it. So it like prolongs.
I thought that was an awesome illustration. A lot of times we try to run away from our problems, and then we just find ourselves dealing with that issue for such a long period of time.
Right.
When we head into the storm and become that, like you said, the buffalo,
Yeah.
and we run into the storm, it is a shorter experience. And I think that's a lot of times what we deal with as leaders, that we don't head into the storm, you know. And going back to the civility thing, it's not to, allow ourselves to be compromised with our civility, but to push forward with our civility intact,
Right.
to be able to handle those issues in the right frame. That again, we're respecting the person while we may have a disagreement on ideas that we need to work through.
Right. Absolutely. And I mean, also, kind of going back to that imagery, there's also another imagery of like eagles. So from what I understand, like eagles as well kind of use, like when they see a storm approaching, they actually head towards it as well because they actually have fun in it. They allow the winds to like blow them higher to greater heights. And I was just like, gosh, if we have that same sort of attitude, whenever we do see that. I mean, also you got to have a wisdom to kind of see, when you should take shelter and when you should, run towards it, and really embrace it. So I think that's where the wisdom part comes from. But I think more times than often we run. And
I think a lot of people run away, and I think leaders choose to face.
Right, absolutely.
And it's not that they're more courageous, but that they just say, I'm going to head on to this problem. I'm going to tackle this issue. It's like you're saying that you've said before, that you are willing to experience that higher quality problem so that you can have success.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, that kind of leads into his next section here, which is, well, there is this need for civility, like in the workplace and our regular interactions with the people. But now, how do we do that? How do we lead with civility in our lives? And I think that's the hard part. We know that there's an issue, but what are the steps? And most importantly, how do we follow through with that?
Yeah. Well, I think that, thinking about mentoring and discipleship, you think about, how sometimes we can think a thing is so much easier if we just do it ourselves. And it often can be true.
Right.
That if I just do this task or I just do this thing, or we can treat people with disrespect and kind of bulldoze people just to get a task done.
Right.
And how that will work, but it only works for a period of time.
Yeah.
Because no one can handle that for a long period of time. But if you come and you really mentor and disciple, then you've just duplicated yourself in a way to where that person can take that thing over, and then you can go on and do other things.
Right.
So, by discipleship, by mentoring people and giving them opportunity to succeed, you're valuing yourself more because you're able to do and accomplish more with a team of people around you.
Right.
I think too many oftentimes we look at the short term rather than the long term effect that we could have. because we're just more concerned about the short term. And I think that affects our stability. If I realize I'm in it for the long haul, then it can be, hey, I need these relationships. I need these people with me, and I need to respect them and value them so that they will help continue to move me forward and move our organization forward.
Right. Well, and that's really, really important. And, awareness is really a part of that process, just like, what's your awareness of that situation? Because, as you delve into a problem or as you go into a storm or you find those situations, awareness is really an important part of that, because I feel like so much, well, at least I speak for myself, but I find myself in those situations where you default to your autopilot response, right? And the autopilot response is more of, hey, I'm going to be short about this. I'm going to think short term, not really long term. I'm going to do whatever I can to protect myself now, in this moment, without really considering, what's ahead 2 or 3 steps and what the actions you're doing now, how that impacts your future down the road.
Well, like in the book of Proverbs, where you think about, the fool versus the person that's wise. A foolish person doesn't care about the consequences. They don't care about, they're almost in defiance of that. They don't think about that. But a wise person thinks about the steps ahead. What does this look like? What's the future look like? And that helps you when you're able to paint the picture of the future. It helps you to backtrack and look at the next steps that need to happen.
Right. So. Well, and I really like what he says here, and I'm going to read it verbatim, just because I don't want to butcher it. But I remember just going through these notes just right before our meeting, and I thought there was a typo here, but there wasn't.
I was going to say something about that because I was a little confused with that. So maybe you can explain it to me.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I just remember that this was such a powerful clincher of a statement during the Global Leadership Summit. But it says, how do you lead others with civility? So Shola says you need to connect to your higher self. So, and it's not higher as in like, your aspiration of like that higher person, higher power, higher person means who were you? Like, how did you describe yourself right before you got hired?
Yeah.
So who was the person you described on your resume during your interview? That's the higher, that's the person that you were trying to put forth, right?
Who were you trying to promote when you got hired?
Exactly. So many times we we try to fluff ourselves up, we try to, like, what would you do in these situations, and then after we get hired, it's like, what happened? You start defaulting back to, your auto response. So
the question should be, am I that person? Am I that person that they hired?
Exactly.
Am I fulfilling that commitment that I've made that, I came in with such eagerness and excitement and here's who I am. Am I fulfilling that? Am I putting that forward? I think that'd be a good question because I think a lot of times, like you're saying, we revert back to our kind of autopilot type of mode. And are we striving to be more than that?
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
But no, I thought that was, and I thought it was funny just because I was rereading and I was like, oh man, there's a typo here. Like this is blatantly wrong, but I just completely forgot.
Yeah, also.
Yeah, so
I see there's values here.
Yeah. So, so he goes on, and that just kind of like hooks up to, how to lead others with civility. And it just kind of gives like that roadmap of, well, what are the values that we should really aspire towards, or what should we like work towards as leaders? So the 5 values, and I'll just list them out. The first one is to value ideas or value the work of the individuals that you're responsible for, or just individuals that you interact with.
So this is really kind of saying that, don't just destroy everything that they're doing and just try to belittle the work and the effort they put into things, right? Mm-hmm. That we should value the work and the time they put into things. Yeah. So I think that too often if we're not in somebody's own shoes, we can kind of look on the outside and say, well, they're not doing that much, or they're not very important, or they don't. I could do their job, you know what I mean? But unless we're in their shoes,
Exactly.
you know, we don't know the dynamics. And I think that's very important as you are somebody that gets further in your organization, or you're leading other people, is to be mindful of everybody's situations. I mean, you know, there's times that sometimes you can lose sight of what everybody else is doing, and you can belittle their effort or belittle their work ethic, and you don't know the dynamics of what they're doing.
Right, absolutely. Well, and also he mentions specifically also is to really respect the wisdom of the people that's closest to the work. You know, so many times, and I've kind of seen this through like different jobs I've been on. But you know, you have this new leader that comes in right, and the first place is like, all right, I have to make a name for myself, and so I have to make sweeping changes without really kind of like taking into consideration the wisdom of the people that are closest to the task, and so I think it's so easy to really make like bad choices, or not really bad choices, but bad choices, but they are choices made without the complete information that's
as you
available.
say that. That's what I think about a lot of times. Do I have a complete information? I was thinking about, it'd be kind of neat to write a book about. I had an idea about blind spots. That,
Oh, right.
What are your blind spots? What are areas in your leadership, ministry, whatever you want to say, that you don't see? Because that would be the only way I can make a good decision is having as much information as I possibly can.
Right.
Now, I don't have to be the one, because we've done DISC assessment here at the church, and I know I'm not the one that's always the collector of information. But am I having people around me to give me that information so that I can make the best possible choice?
Right.
I'm better at making a decision or a choice. Sorry, getting a clean call. I'm making a decision and a choice, for maybe the organization, but I need to have all the information at hand. So having the information at hand, I want to make sure this is silent so we don't have that happen again. But having that information on hand is very crucial and very important to be able to make that very important decision, if you understand what I'm saying.
No, absolutely. And I think so many times I found myself in that situation where you just go into a situation and it's just like, all right, like I feel like I know this, right? But we also have to kind of keep in mind that each situation could be different. Yeah. And once we default to saying, oh, I know this, while that does make the process easier, there could be things that we're glossing over, different perspectives, or it could be a new situation entirely.
Yeah, so having an understanding that you may have blind spots, and there might be spots that you need to find out more information. And that's one thing that I've kind of learned over my years of growing in leadership was, a lot of times I would take offense if somebody didn't like my idea right away because I was attached to my idea too much. But understanding that if it's a good idea, then I need to let it to be scrutinized a little bit, because maybe there's things I'm not seeing that could affect something else. And so getting as much information, and at no point you can almost be paralyzed not to make a choice, but to just make sure you've checked out, like you're saying, talk to the people that are closest to the work, just like he says.
I think it's interesting because, like in my daily work, I usually have like a checklist, and so like whenever, it really helps, like especially like when you're super busy, you're in the moment, and it's like, all right, I have to do this, and so you default to what you normally think you should. But I feel like a checklist kind of keeps everything in perspective. Like, what are the questions I need to ask myself? Because 9 times out of 10. You're probably okay, but that one time, the situation's different, and you need more information. But so that kind of like segues into the second value, and that is value the roles of the people you interact with. And just really to appreciate the importance of the contribution, the unique contribution that they provide to the team or, to each other, whether that's relationships like your family, really appreciating those contributions or, like as in a church or, in a career or, whatever the case may be, but just be aware of the value and the contribution that those individuals provide.
And I think that's so key to kind of be aware of people's contributions. Not that you need to keep a tally, but really I think it's good to just right away acknowledge people. And that's what I try to do because it's easy to forget, if you wait too long. But in the moment, if you see something good, to try to bring attention to that, to say, hey, I really appreciate your help, or acknowledge the effort or the time it takes because people are sacrificing. I guess I'm leading into that other thing because the role is important to respect. I know I'm leading into time, so I'll stop myself short. Because I think that, you think about anything you try to do, each role is very important to a team. And, a lot of times we can put priority for this person or, well, this person's in front of the camera or this person's, doing the editing. Well, it may take, it takes a lot of people in that realm to make things happen. And so each person's very vital and very important in those roles.
Yeah, absolutely.
No matter what you do.
Well, and it's also like they talk, where I kind of see that is like, all right, when you have like this multi-billion-dollar like company, right? You still have to have a janitor, right? Yep. And so just because a janitor does those particular types of duties, doesn't mean that they're less important because, what if you don't have janitors, that could lead to, issues with your employees, So, I mean, everyone has their role that they play. And I think,
as you mentioned, janitors, those are probably sometimes the most forgotten people, right? Because you don't always see them. You don't always see the work that they do, or you don't notice anything out of awry. So it's like,
exactly.
You know what I mean?
They're behind the scenes.
Yeah, exactly.
And that really, as you've kind of mentioned, that leads into valuing time, and that's huge. Just recognizing that people do have time, and that is
and they only have
resource.
So much time.
Exactly. Yeah. Right.
Well, like you said, resource, that there's only so much time you have. And for you to be and I think that we need to think about that a lot with our work environments. Are we allowing people to have the time with their family? Are we allowing the people to have time with things? I think there's this unfortunate stereotype, whether it's ministry or even in the workplace, that if you're not working 40 plus hours, then somehow you're not a very good employee, which, maybe you'd be a better employee if you had more of a balance.
Yeah.
Just because you put 60 hours in a week, is it a quality work?
Yeah, absolutely.
Is it really busy work, or are you really getting things moving forward? And
I think, I mean, that's such a great point, quality versus time, because it's like, all right, did you spend like pretty much like 40 hours, as you said, and you're just like, all right, I'm devoting 10 minutes to this task, take a 10-minute break, do another task. And I think really quality is what we should really strive towards, where you could have like an hour and you have like the best product as a result of just spending that focused time. But it's so hard also to have that focused time. I feel like there's so many things that just pop into your mind and kind of really distracts you from your original intention. So, but yeah. And then the next one, of course, is value number 4 is valuing skills. And that really introduces this like trust component into the conversation. And a lot of times it's hard to really trust people maybe with like a task. And I think it's, that saying that's prevalent out there, it's like, well, if I want the job done, I have to do it myself, right? Yeah. And I've heard that, like thrown so many times, and it's like, well, why are you having to do that? You know, it's like, all right, do you really trust this person to like, did you hire this person to do this? If you're having trust issues, well, did you make the right decision hiring that person? Or are you just not willing to let go and let them do what you hired them to do or whatever you chose them to do?
So. It's easy to become a micromanager
when
you
right.
don't have faith or trust in people. And, I think it can be kind of a challenge when you care about something and you really value it to trust and let go.
Yeah.
But again, there's only so much work you can do.
Exactly.
And by giving that person an opportunity, you're investing in them and giving them a chance to do something with that or take that area further than you could have took it.
Right.
Or, and also it helps free you up to do new things to make a difference and a change lives. So sometimes, letting go and trusting and stepping out in faith in a way and saying, hey, I'm going to trust that person's skill.
Right.
It just shows that person, that you value what they do and that you believe in them.
Right. Well, and the thing too is we also have to remember that we were at that stage once, and we still are at that stage to where we ourselves can make mistakes. And it's not even really a matter of can, we will make mistakes. So, and when that occurs, if we're mindful, we're thoughtful, we'll learn from those mistakes. That's where growth happens. And so if we step in and say, all right, I'm going to do this to the best of my ability because I don't trust you, because I feel like you're going to make a mistake, we rob them of that, the ability to grow. Because, you should share we should share what sort of mistakes, what sort of processes we went through, but then it's up to them. And then when they make a mistake, right, then we could say, all right, how could we learn from this? How could we grow? Because it could be possibly a mistake that, the next person made, And so we learn through that process. So, but yeah. And then finally, the last one is value their humanity. And the quote that Shola shared with us really hit home with me, just because, so let's say you're in a call center, right? Or you're talking to someone, you're at a store, and someone was just being disrespectful, right? You're trying to have a good conversation, or maybe you're trying to interact with them. It's part of like a business transaction, and they just, they don't behave properly. And Shola he says, all right, those situations are going to happen regardless of how well we try to do. But at the same token, we still have to value their humanity. And the quote he says is, all bad behavior is an unskilled expression of an unmet need. And that hit home with me just because, all right, you're having this day, you're having a bad day, right? Could be a bad driver, could be an irate customer, whatever the case may be, but, they have an unmet need and they're just unskilled in communicating that need.
Yeah, and trying to figure out ways to get that out of them, I'm sure, is the challenge, right? But understanding that, the first thing is, like we talked about, being aware that they're dealing with other things. It's not always that they're just wanting to be a bad employee. It may be that they're not fully able to express themselves or unskilled in that area. So is there ways that we can help them become more skilled in that to where they can fully express themselves?
Right, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I mean, that kind of leads back to the the first value. And, that first value is, value their ideas.
Yeah.
And part of that is saying, what tools can I provide them that can help them grow? Maybe they don't have the ability to communicate well. So can we have like a conversation, or at least just be mindful of that and say, all right, they just don't know how to communicate this well, but I may know what they're wanting. And, a lot of times, those people, if you're able to help difficult individuals, you'll find out that, they become one of your best customers if you do meet their need.
Yeah. So you guys want to talk about leading self with civility. So what were some of the things that you'd like to share about that? I guess we talked about the buffalo. Was Craig Gershell just chiming in on that, or was that part of this discussion? I see that he has a statement here.
Yeah. So what I did when I compiled these notes is I really tried to take a look at similarities between the speakers. And this was a quote that Craig Rochelle did. So Craig Rochelle is one of the speakers of the Global Leadership Summit. He's also the champion for the summit as well. So he's usually the first speaker at bat. But Craig Rochelle mentioned, he said, the difference between where you are and where you could be is the amount of pain you're willing to endure. Yeah. And that kind of hooks back and kind of loops back to this imagery that we had, right, of the cow and the buffalo. And I think that kind of hits home because the cow's like trying to run away from the storm. So he's prolonging the distance between the impending storm, right? It's going to happen regardless. It's just taking more time. Whereas, the buffalo heads towards it. And, as the two things are going towards each other, the time is not as much. But also, the same token is we look at people who work out, right? Mm-hmm. What does it take for you to get strong, have, huge muscles, right? If that's what you're about, it takes time, it takes dedication, it takes perseverance. And, our last podcast, we talked about the grind, right? Yeah. And it kind of hits home and kind of pulls that all back together and saying, all right, here's what I need to be able to do in order to get there. And of course, being there is also a matter of like attitude as well, right? And Shola talks about this because this topic is how do you lead yourself with civility, right? And a lot of times we find out that we're our own harshest critic, and that's a tough thing. Like I have, I find myself struggling with that so many times, because you find yourself in that rut or that difficult situation and you make a mistake and you're usually like the first to know about that. And you like, oh gosh, you wake up in the middle of the night, right? And you ruminate or you think about that mistake. And we kind of forget to move past and learn from that and grow and focus on the growth part.
Yeah, no, to add to what you're saying there, like I think I read one of the points here is the fact that, when you treat yourself, with contempt or with those frustrations that you have, you're often finding yourself treating people around you that way too.
Right.
So if you can treat yourself with love and respect, and again, I go back to the scripture where it says, Jesus tells us to love God with all of our heart, with all our soul, with all our mind. And he says, love your neighbor as yourself. Well, he's calling us to love ourselves and to love our neighbor as ourselves.
Right.
So, a lot of times we don't think about that. We're just like, oh, we need to love our neighbor. Well, if we love ourselves and care about ourselves enough, then we can really love other people. Yeah. And so, I think that, treat people, not just how you want to be treated, but try to treat yourself well so that your heart is ready to treat people with respect and love. And I know, like you said, a lot of times we can all be hard on ourselves. But isn't that the great story of the gospel is that God's given us grace. Yeah. God loves you. And there wasn't anything that's going to change that. That we're loved first. And God goes back to the humanity aspect. God did not, expect us to clean up and then he would die for us or send his son to die for us. He loved us and making a statement, even at our worst, he loved us. He cared for us. So knowing that you're valuable, that you matter, that God put value on you to offer himself up as a sacrifice for us, extend that love that God gives you to other people.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that's really key, right? Because once we realize that, then we have, I feel like, a Christian obligation to provide that, extend that same amount of grace to the people in our lives. Yeah. And so many times it reminds me of the parable that, Jesus shared where, the master forgave his servant's debts, and the servant turned around and, acted harshly against another person that owed him. And when the master found out about this, he was furious. And I think so many times, and we kind of see that really exemplified in like a lot of what Jesus says as well, forgive each other, forgive each other, or, ask God to forgive us like we have forgiven the people around us. So, really, really amazing, amazing stuff. And just from this section on how to lead self with civility, there were two quotes that I really want to touch upon before we kind of wrap things up. But the first one was, you're born looking like your dad, or in this case it says daddy, and you die looking like your decisions. And I thought that was so powerful, like we don't have a choice as to what we look like when we're born. But when we pass away, our decisions dictate what we look like, both, spiritually, physically. And I thought that was so powerful because so many times we blame our parents, we blame all these external factors, and we forget that ultimately we have the choice.
Well, and you think about too, like he mentions about your funeral. What are people going to be saying about you? What are the conversations going to be? And I think that's again, not to be morbid, but if we would think about what the end result is going to be when we die, it kind of helps us know how we want to lead our life, how we want to go, what direction we want to be in. And I think that's what we should be thinking about is like, what is the end result?
Right.
And then work our way again backwards to say, okay, what steps do I need to take to get there? What baby steps can I take? What little steps can I take? And then hopefully gain momentum as you go. But having that desire to say, hey, I'm going to lead myself in that direction. I'm going to take those steps to try to be more caring or be more compassionate to those around me. And one of the scriptures that rings out to me so much, and I can't seem to escape it, is when Simon was having people over for dinner and Jesus showed up, and this woman comes in and she weeps and she cries, and all of her tears wipe the feet of Jesus. And then she takes her hair and dries his feet with her hair, and then she takes this oil and she pours it over his feet. And one of the questions, everybody's asking, if Jesus knew who this woman was, he would have nothing to do with her because evidently she was a prostitute. And the thing of it is that Jesus says to Simon, the person that invited him to his home, he says, "Do you see this woman?" And I think that is such a question that he already knew who she was, and he knew her background, but he didn't look at her. He didn't really see her.
Right.
And how many people do we work with? Do we have working behind the scenes like we've talked about? Do we actually see those people? Do we actually acknowledge those people? When you go to a gas station or restaurant, are we looking at our waiters? Are we seeing them as people? Because I think that brings back to humility and humanity, to have that heart to look at people and see them as people rather than just servers or custodians or people in the background. They're people,
Absolutely. Yeah. No, and that's really, really powerful, because I think once we start to understand that they are humans as well, it's like, and that seems like such a weird concept, it's like they're humans too, it's like they have feelings.
Well, I think the problem is really we become it's easy for all of us to become self-absorbed, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's really the fall of man is we think we're our own God. So we don't have any attachment really that's necessary.
Yeah.
Well, that's a big lie. We were called to be in fellowship. We were called to be in fellowship with God. We were called to be in fellowship with others. And so when we get detached from that, we miss out on the greater purpose of our life.
Right. No, that's, I completely agree. And I think, as you said, once we start realizing that, we start to realize that we have that choice, you know? And I think it's really just like kicking ourselves out of like autopilot, right? Saying, all right, I'm going to make this choice to take the next step with, you know, how I treat people with civility. And I think that kind of leads into like that closing sentence that Shola mentioned. And what he did is he closed off with a Maya Angelou quote. And it's, I've learned that people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel.
Yeah.
And there's this other example of, I think it was like a politician. I don't recall the specifics, but you had these two politicians and they talked to the exact same person. And the person voted for the politician that made that person feel like they knew everything, right?
Yeah.
The other politician acted like he knew everything, he or she knew everything, and that person didn't get the vote. But the person that made the voter feel like they were, like they knew everything, they made them feel like seen.
Yeah.
That was the politician that got the vote. So
Absolutely.
so yeah, that's kind of like that's what reminds me when I read or hear that quote.
No, I completely agree with that. I think that a lot of times we think we are so self-absorbed that we think that we're all that in a bag of chips, I guess, and we're not. You know, but if we care about people in such a way that we care what they have going on in their life and what they're experiencing, it adds value, and it adds value to their life to make them feel like they're cared about, that they're respected. A lot of people, and I guess that goes back to really what we're talking about, civility, is to respect. You know, to treat people with respect.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, thank you so much for sharing this with us, and I really appreciate you doing this, because I think that just having this conversation about leadership is very important. So thank you for joining us.
Hey, you're very much welcome. It's a pleasure.
Thank you for joining us today, and we hope that this has helped you to take the next step in your leadership. Be sure to join us next time on Lead Me. Take care.